appreciate you taking time to come out, and it's a pleasure to give you what is generally a pretty positive report about the 2011 General Assembly session. But before I jump into the details of the session, let me just echo Ann's comments about the work that Justin Torres did during the General Assembly session. Give Justin credit. He applied a year ago and was not successful, and was persistent and applied again. And the application process itself is some work. Justin and I visited both years prior to him sending a fair amount of information into the Speaker's office, and it's a competitive position, and I was pleased to see not only Justin selected, but I was pleased to see the work that he did while he was there. You get a chance to watch the pages, and you can just imagine if you watch a group of 13 and 14-year-olds, sometimes some are having better days than others. But, Justin was alert and on the job and paying attention. I doubt if anybody jumped over the rope while you were there. Really enjoyed the opportunity to travel back up the road. Got asked a lot of good questions, and trust me, Justin was paying attention during some of those debates, and I think it was just a great example of how rewarding an experience that can be. We did have, I think, a pretty positive session, and as I look back on it, I come back to what a difference 2 years makes. The leadership of this administration, with our governor, a Republican lieutenant governor, and a Republican attorney general, I really think is making a difference, along with our very strong majority that we have in the House of Delegates. But having been in office with a Republican majority in the House, but a Democrat operating out of the governor's mansion, I can tell you it makes a difference when you've got the legislative and the executive branch pulling together, setting the agenda, and hopefully doing things that will improve the quality of life for Virginians. The governor came in with an agenda. He laid it out. He continued the focus that he started last year in terms of jobs and the economy, advocated a responsible budget, indicated that he thought there were things that we needed to do in the areas of higher education and transportation, and continued some of the initiatives that were coming out of the Government Reform Commission that he appointed shortly after he was inaugurated in January a year ago. And if you look back at what comes out of this session, I think pretty clearly those are the things that come out of this session. A responsible budget, a budget that peeled back some of the fees that were put in place a little over a year ago in a very challenging time, a budget that focused on core services of government, and a budget that looked ahead a little bit and recognized that we're not totally out of the woods yet. And so as we see the economy start to improve, let's put some money into the rainy day fund. Let's make sure that as we spend money, we're focused on things that are structurally sound. And we had a contrast as we saw two budgets come out of the House and Senate. Some folks, I was starting to get some email after the House had passed a budget and the Senate had passed a budget. People said, well, the Senate's got more money for this. And, well, that's right, because the Senate had more money for everything. They spent more money than the House did. And I'm not sure how you're supposed to be able to do that when you're supposedly working off the same set of revenues, but somehow they managed to do it. They had a lot more borrowing that they wanted to do. They proposed building a new office building for General Assembly members, and that's something that will have to happen at some point in the future, but now's not the time. So fortunately, I think we were able to come together, and Justin finished his work on time on the 26th. We ran a day over until Sunday the 27th, but certainly that's better than some years we've spent a better part of the spring in Richmond. And it is a budget that accomplished a lot of the goals that we had in the House, and continues to focus on jobs and economic growth. And since in the 3 weeks we've been home, I think we continue to see the importance of that, with a good report last week on where unemployment is in Virginia. It is continuing to drop. We still have way too many people out of work, but we're making progress. We are creating jobs. And then seeing today's economic numbers that see revenues coming in for the month of February significantly ahead of where they were a year ago. And yet a tempered message from the governor as he releases those numbers that says, we recognize we're not out of the woods yet, and we recognize that more revenues coming to Richmond when you've got a family in Roanoke that's still struggling to pay the bills, there can be a disconnect there, and so we can't get too far ahead of ourselves with this. So I think we just continue to see the right kind of message, a responsible message, a fiscally conservative message, and I'm hoping that will carry forward as we head to November, when the entire House and the entire Senate are both up for election. Your newsletter does a outstanding job, Martha, of covering some of the things that we touched on, and I appreciate your interest in some of the things that, whether it's the legislation that I carried or working with some of my colleagues like Sal Iaquinto from Virginia Beach on trying to improve taxpayers' rights as they go through the appeals process on local taxes. Sal and I actually sit together on the floor, and Sal is a bright and hard-working guy, and he's been working on this issue for a couple of years now, and was successful in getting the balance shifted back a little bit towards the taxpayer and away from local government on the tax appeals issue. So a lot of credit to him. And Martha, I had not seen the VEA comment on my education reform bill, so I appreciated you sharing that with me. That bill was very interesting to work on. Last year we spent a lot of time seeing what we might do to advance charter schools in Virginia. And one of the criticisms last year was, well, you provide regulatory relief to charter schools, but you won't do it for public schools. And the governor was even quoted somewhere along in the process as saying, well, we might be willing to take a look at that. And Doug, from your service on the school board, one of the challenges that a local school board does face is in many areas their hands are tied by federal and state regulation, and they have no choice but to allocate precious resources to things that may or may not be a local priority. And so I introduced legislation this year that did just that. It said we're going to provide an opportunity for the local public schools to come before the Board of Education and seek regulatory relief the same way that we do for charter schools or some of the regional governor schools. Bill got a good hearing in the House, got a good strong vote in the House. Went over to the Senate Education and Health Committee, and an interesting dynamic because the superintendents and the school board supported the bill, but the Education Association did not. And we had a pretty close call there. We had an 8-7 vote, but it just inherently made so much sense that even on the floor of the Senate it passed by 33-7. So that other than some of the members of that committee that just were apparently totally beholden to the VEA, even the vast majority of the Senate said this is just a logical and common sense bill, and I appreciate Martha highlighting it. We do still have some contrast clearly between the House and the Senate. We had a number of measures, a number of areas that we continue to try to work on in the House, and we can get good strong votes coming out of the House on any number of issues. We had a number of illegal immigration measures this year that were successful in the House, and we spent a lot of time looking at the illegal immigration issue before we introduced these bills. Many of you know, and you've heard about the Arizona legislation. We had members of the House of Delegates who actually took time and went out to Arizona and met with those legislators to learn the details of those bills. And they brought back information, and they went through and they did a detailed analysis of the Arizona bill. And we found elements in the Arizona bill that frankly we've already put in place in Virginia, which was positive. We saw some other elements of the Arizona bill that we also frankly question whether they'll stand the test of time in the courts process. But we tried to really target certain areas where we think we still have some challenges, particularly in the public safety area. And we saw, unfortunately, during the course of the session, we saw incidents occurring in Virginia where we've got some pretty heinous crimes being committed by illegal immigrants. And law enforcement has been told these people are criminals and has been told they're in this country illegally. And we were able to get some of these measures out of the House. Essentially none of them came through the Senate, and that's one place where we have that contrast. We were fortunate this year. An area that's been a struggle between the House and the Senate is the area of property rights, and we did successfully pass out of the House and the Senate for the first time, and it'll have to pass again next year, and then it would ultimately go to you for final approval. But we did pass an eminent domain constitutional amendment that addresses some of the concerns of the Kelo decision. We've toughened up our law dealing with Kelo, but we have also now have had the first passage of something to put it in the state constitution, which I think is equally positive. But those differences by and large remain. And that's a real quick run through, touching on a number of issues with 45 days and over 2,000 bills on any range of issues. And as Justin can tell you, some a little more serious than others perhaps, but we did take on a number of issues. I continue to enjoy my service on the Agriculture Committee, the Transportation Committee, the General Laws Committee, and the Science and Technology Committee. I spent a lot of time working on some water quality legislation this year. Ladies and gentlemen, the Environmental Protection Agency has effectively twisted our arm to advance what was a positive Chesapeake Bay cleanup program already that we had in place. But they've told us that we weren't doing enough and we weren't doing it fast enough. And the administration, to their credit, sat down and tried to come up with some ideas. Some of those ideas that they had offered to EPA and EPA thought looked accessible, we had to put into legislation, but we had to be sure we did it the right way. And fortunately, a lot of people, whether they were landscape companies or farmers or golf course managers, a lot of people came to the table and said, here's a practical way we can do this. Here's some things we can do. Lawn fertilizer manufacturers saying, we think we can reformulate some of these products and make them more environmentally friendly. Just give us enough time to do it the right way. Let us sell the existing stock we have. Do it in an intelligent way. And so I enjoyed working on some of those issues along the way. We've got more work to do in that area, but it's an area that certainly is important to everyone, from local farmers to Doug to somebody who likes to go out and hit a golf ball around from time to time. But with that, Ann, I'll quit and answer questions. I certainly appreciate this group and your support for elected Republicans, not just at the state level, but at all levels. We are fortunate. We've got a pretty good team right now, but that team runs on your support. So thank you very much.